The ballroom of the Grand Joseon Hotel glittered with white orchids and crystal chandeliers, and Lee Tae-hyun stood at the altar in a black tuxedo, his jaw tight, his hands folded behind his back like a man bracing for something he could not name. 200 guests filled the seats. Executives, socialites, reporters pretending not to take photos. His mother, Choi Hae-suk, sat in the front row in a cream hanbok, her lips curved into the first real smile she had worn in 8 years. Tonight, her son would finally give the Lee family what it had been denied: an heir. Then the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. A woman walked in wearing deep gold, her posture straight, her eyes calm in a way that made the room instinctively quiet. Tae-hyun's breath caught in his throat. Abena, the wife he had divorced 8 years ago for being unable to give him a child. But she was not alone. 4 boys walked beside her, matching her stride, dressed in identical navy suits. One of them turned his head toward the altar, and Tae-hyun felt his entire chest cave in. The boy had his eyes. Another had his exact jawline. A third tilted his head the same way Tae-hyun did when he was thinking. The fourth simply stared at him, unblinking, the way a child stares at something he has been told about but never seen. Whispers rippled through the guests. Hae-suk rose halfway out of her seat, her smile gone. Tae-hyun's mouth opened before his mind caught up. "Abena," he whispered. Who are those boys?" The music stopped. Abena's eyes locked on his, and in them was 8 years of something he had never let himself imagine. "You know exactly who they are," she said quietly. "You just don't want to believe it." Then her voice dropped lower, cold enough to cut through the string quartet that had gone silent behind her. "And don't mistake this for a reunion, Tae-hyun. I didn't fly here to stop your wedding. I came to take back what should have always been mine." She didn't say if she meant her sons, or her place in his company, or something he hadn't even let himself consider yet. Tae-hyun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning, because he genuinely had no idea which answer terrified him more. Welcome to Story Nest Tales. If you're new here, kindly like, subscribe, and comment, and stay with us through the story. 8 years earlier, Lee Tae-hyun had never planned on falling in love with a woman his mother would call unsuitable. He had flown to Kumasi on business, chasing a rumor about a small Ghanaian supplier producing shea butter of a purity his lab couldn't replicate. He expected a warehouse tour and a signed contract. Instead, he met Abena Owusu, a sharp-eyed woman in her 20s who ran quality control for the supplier and had no patience for a Korean CEO who assumed her country's ingredients were raw materials rather than craftsmanship. "You've been talking for 10 minutes?" Abena told him on their first meeting, arms crossed. "And you haven't once asked how we actually make this. You just asked how fast we can ship it." "I was told the meeting was 30 minutes, Tae-hyun said. "I assumed brevity was respected here too." "Respect is asking questions before you write the check," she said. He blinked. No one spoke to him like that. Not his board. Not his own mother. "Then teach me," he said. She did. Over the following weeks he found himself extending his trip, then extending it again, inventing reasons his assistant back in Seoul stopped believing after the 3rd phone call. He learned the names of her workers. He sat on the floor of her family's compound eating banku with his hands while her grandmother laughed at how badly he failed, swatting his wrist and telling him a man who ate like that would starve in Ghana. "You're not what I expected from a Korean CEO," Abena admitted one evening, watching him attempt and fail to bargain properly at the market. "What did you expect? Someone who thinks kindness is a weakness." "I think kindness is the only thing worth building a company around," he said. "I just don't say it in board meetings. They'd think I'd gone soft." Abena visited Seoul the following spring, and Tae-hyun watched her fall in love with a city that had never once felt like home to him. They walked along the Han River at midnight, sharing convenience store ramen because every proper restaurant had closed. "You're different here," she told him, looking out over the water. "Lighter." "That's because I'm not performing for anyone," he said. "Not with you." He proposed 6 months later on that same riverbank without a ring designer or a publicist or a single person from his company present. Just the two of them and the water and a small velvet box he had bought himself, badly wrapped because he'd insisted on doing it alone. "Marry me," he said, kneeling on concrete that scraped through his trousers. "Not the heir to Lee Group, just me." "Ask me properly," she teased, laughing through tears. "Abena Owusu, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said. 1,000 times, yes." His mother did not share his joy. "She is not one of us?" Hae-suk said flatly, the first time he brought Abena home, looking her up and down like an auditor reviewing a flawed contract. "She does not understand what it means to carry the Lee name. She understands more about respect than half the people in your social circle," Tae-hyun answered. "Love is easy when there is nothing at stake," his mother said, her voice cold. "Marriage is different. You will see." "Then let me see it my own way," Tae-hyun said. "You saw yours. It cost you your own happiness." Hae-suk's face tightened at that, but she said nothing more. He married Abena anyway, in a small ceremony that combined both their cultures. Kent cloth draped beside a Korean piebeek table, and for 5 years, he believed he had proven his mother wrong. They were happy. Genuinely, unguarded, ordinary Tuesday happy. Abena redesigned 2 of his product lines using ingredients from her home country, and both became bestsellers within a year. Tae-hyun learned enough Chui to embarrass himself at family gatherings on purpose, just to hear her laugh until she cried. Then came the pressure for a child. It started as questions at dinner. "Any news?" Hae-suk would ask, sipping her tea, eyes flicking toward Abena's stomach. Then it became something sharper. 3 years married," Hae-suk said one evening, setting down her chopsticks with deliberate precision. "In my generation, a wife who cannot conceive within 3 years is asked serious questions." "We're not living in your generation, mother," Tae-hyun said. "A family like ours cannot disappear," Hae-suk continued, as though he hadn't spoken. "Because you were too sentimental to make the right choice from the beginning. Have you had yourself tested? Perhaps the issue isn't hers at all." "Enough," Tae-hyun snapped, standing so fast his chair scraped the floor. Abena said nothing at dinner. But later that night, alone in their bedroom, she asked quietly, "Do you believe her? That something is wrong with me?" "No," Tae-hyun said immediately. "Of course not." But Abena noticed how long it took him to answer. What Abena couldn't have known was that Hae-suk's obsession wasn't only pride. 30 years earlier, she herself had spent 4 childless years married into this family, enduring a mother-in-law who called her useless in front of relatives at every gathering, until Tae-hyun was finally born and the insults stopped overnight as if they had never happened. She had buried that decade so deep she rarely let herself remember it. She told herself, lying awake some nights, that she was protecting her son from a fate worse than the one she had survived. It didn't make what came next forgivable, but it made it human. Hae-suk did not wait for her son to come around on his own. She summoned Dr. Kwon Sung-min, a fertility specialist whose clinic had received a very generous research donation from the Lee Group the year before, and made her intentions clear without ever saying them aloud. "Run every test," she told him, sliding a folder across his desk. "Full workup. I want answers, doctor. Precise ones. Mrs. Choi, if I may ask what kind of—" "The kind that ends a marriage I never approved of," Hae-suk said, meeting his eyes without blinking. "I trust your discretion is worth what we've contributed to your research fund." Dr. Kwon ran the tests. The results showed nothing abnormal. Abena's fertility was completely healthy, every marker well within range. Hae-suk read the report twice, her face unreadable, then set it down on the doctor's desk with a soft, deliberate click of her pen. "That is not the answer we need," she said. "Mrs. Choi, I can't simply—" "You can," Hae-suk said. "And you will, unless you'd like the Lee Group to reconsider its ongoing relationship with your clinic. Publicly, if necessary." 3 days later, a different report reached Tae-hyun's office. This one used cold clinical language to describe a severe, likely permanent reproductive disorder. Tae-hyun read it standing at his window, and something in his chest went very quiet. That night, he told Abena, sliding the folder across the table with hands that wouldn't stay steady. She read it once, twice, her face draining of color. Then she shook her head slowly. "Something is wrong with this," she said. "I feel completely normal, Tae-hyun. My body hasn't given me a single sign. Please, get a second opinion before you believe a single word of it." "Dr. Kwon is one of the best in the country," Tae-hyun said. "Do you trust a piece of paper?" Abena asked quietly. "More than you trust your own wife?" He didn't answer. That silence told her everything. Over the following weeks, Tae-hyun grew distant in ways Abena could feel before she could name. He came home later. He stopped reaching for her hand at dinner. His mother, meanwhile, grew warmer toward Abena than she had been in years. An unsettling kindness that felt less like affection and more like a woman clearing a path. One night, Tae-hyun sat across from Abena in their kitchen. His hands folded so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "I think," he said, "we should separate." Abena's cup slipped slightly in her hand. "Tae-hyun." "Say that again." Slowly. "I've thought about it for weeks," he continued, staring at the table rather than her. "The company needs an heir. My family needs." "Your family?" she repeated, her voice rising now. "Not you? You don't need me anymore? Is that it?" "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you said. You just wrapped it in politeness." She stood, chair scraping backward. "If I could never have children, would that erase everything we built together? 5 years. Tae-hyun. Everything we survived to be together, your mother's insults, the board's whispers, all of it. Gone because of one piece of paper." "I don't know," he said. "Do you still love me?" The silence stretched long enough to answer for him. "I don't know," he said again, and it broke her worse than any direct rejection could have. "Then you already have your answer," Abena said, voice shaking. "You just don't have the courage to say it out loud." Abena signed the divorce papers 3 weeks later, her hand trembling so badly the signature barely looked like her own. Before she left the apartment they had shared, she slid her wedding ring across the table toward him. "You didn't lose me," she said, "because I couldn't give you a child. You lost me because you stopped trusting me the moment your mother told you to." She flew back to Ghana that same week. Tae-hyun stood in their empty apartment, telling himself over and over that he had made the responsible decision. He believed it, until 3 months later, when Abena sat on the edge of a hospital bed in Kumasi, gripping the metal rail so hard her knuckles ached, listening to a doctor explain something that made absolutely no sense. "You're pregnant," the doctor told her, checking the chart twice, then a third time, murmuring something to a nurse before turning back. "And Mrs. Owusu, there are 4 heartbeats." Abena's whole body went numb. "4," she repeated. "That's not possible. I was told I couldn't." "Whoever told you that," the doctor said gently, "was wrong. Very wrong. The infertility diagnosis had been a lie. It had to have been. Her body was proof, growing proof, undeniable proof, and the moment the shock wore off, one single desperate thought took over. She had to tell Tae-hyun. She wrote him a letter that night, pouring in every test result, every scan, every trembling word she had left in her. "I know we're no longer married," she wrote, "but you deserve to know your children exist. Whatever happens next is your choice. But please, don't let another lie stand between us." She sealed it, addressed it to his office, and asked her cousin Yaw, studying in Seoul, to deliver it by hand and wait for a response. Yo walked into the Lee Group Tower 2 days later and was intercepted at reception by an assistant who would be happy to pass the letter along personally. The letter reached Hae-suk's desk within the hour. She read 3 lines before her expression hardened into something final. "For children," she murmured almost to herself. "So the doctor was right the first time, and I was the one who buried it." She folded the letter once, then again, then fed it into the shredder beside her desk without a flicker of hesitation, watching the paper curl into ribbons. When Tae-hyun asked, weeks later, whether Abena had ever tried to contact him, his mother looked him dead in the eye. "She never reached out," Hae-suk said smoothly. "Not once. She has clearly moved on, Tae-hyun. You should do the same." He believed her. Abena waited for a call that never came. Every day, she checked her phone. Every week, the silence grew heavier. Eventually, sitting alone in a small rented room with a growing belly and no husband, she made peace with a truth she never wanted. She would raise these children alone. Kwame, Kofi, Kojo, and Kweku were born on a stormy night in Kumasi. For heartbeats becoming 4 screaming, healthy boys, and Abena wept holding them, not entirely from joy. The years that followed were not easy. She worked twice as hard as anyone around her, stitching together a life from what little she had, refusing every offer of help that came with strings attached. There were nights she counted coins to buy formula. Nights she sat outside the boys' shared room listening to them breathe, just to remind herself why she kept going. Late at night, after the boys were finally asleep, she experimented in her kitchen with shea butter, baobab oil, and black soap her grandmother had taught her to make. Her first products sold from a folding table outside her cousin's shop, hand-labeled, imperfect, honest. 2 years in, a buyer from Accra's largest pharmacy chain stopped at her stall, picked up a jar, read the label, and set it back down without buying. "This isn't ready for real shelves," he told her flatly. "Come back when it looks professional." Abena went home that night, sat on the floor between her 4 sleeping sons, and cried for the first time in months, seriously considering giving up and taking a steady job instead. Then Kojo stirred in his sleep and mumbled her name without waking, and something in her hardened instead of broke. She redesigned the labels herself by hand until they looked like something from a real shelf. She reworked one struggling cream using a recipe her grandmother swore by for stubborn skin conditions. Months later, a mother walked into her stall in tears, holding up her daughter's arm, clear for the first time in a year. "Whatever you put in this," the woman said, gripping Abena's hands, "you have to let more people know it exists." That single testimonial reached a distributor in Accra, then a buyer in Lagos, then an inquiry from Paris. Within 4 years, Naira Botanicals had a real storefront. Within 6, it had international buyers knocking on her door, and Abena stood in front of her own factory floor, watching workers she employed package products bearing her name, and allowed herself, finally, to feel proud. She never told her sons the whole truth about their father. One day, she told them whenever they asked why they didn't have one, kneeling to their eye level, "You'll understand why some people make terrible choices. Until then, know this: you were never a mistake. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." 7,000 kilometers away, Tae-hyun's company thrived in every measurable way and felt emptier with each passing year. He expanded into 3 new markets. He was profiled in business magazines as Korea's most disciplined young CEO. None of it filled the specific silence that had settled into his apartment since the divorce. Some nights, sitting alone in an apartment far too large for one man, he caught himself reaching for a phone to call a number he'd deleted years ago before remembering, all over again, that the marriage was over. He filled the silence with work, then charity galas, then more work, and told his assistant he was adjusting well, so often that he almost believed it himself. He married Han Soo-jin, the poised daughter of another powerful family, mostly because it was easier to say yes than to keep explaining why he kept saying no. The wedding was scheduled. The invitations were sent. His mother finally seemed satisfied. Then his procurement team sent him a proposal for a new international skincare partnership, one built entirely around African botanical ingredients, spearheaded by a company that had grown faster than almost anything in its category that year. Naira Botanicals. Founder, Abena Owusu. Tae-hyun read the name 3 times before his hands stopped shaking. He told himself it was a coincidence. A common name. It had to be. Until the day Abena walked into his boardroom in Seoul, flanked by 4 boys who were clearly not there for a business meeting, and Tae-hyun's entire understanding of the last 8 years quietly began to collapse. "Mrs. Owusu," he managed, rising from his chair. "I didn't realize." "I imagine you didn't," Abena said, her tone perfectly professional, perfectly unreadable. "Shall we begin?" The meeting proceeded as though nothing were wrong. Contracts, projections, handshakes. Tae-hyun barely heard a word of it. his eyes drifting again and again toward the four boys seated quietly along the back wall. At the reception following the signing, one of the boys wandered from his brothers, drawn toward the dessert table. Tae-hyun knelt to help him reach a plate, and something about the boy's face made his hands go still. "What's your name?" Tae-hyun asked. "Kofi," the boy said simply. Tae-hyun studied him. The eyes, the exact shape of his own mother's eyes, somehow inherited, somehow undeniable. Before he could process it, 3 more boys arrived, drawn by their brother's absence, and Tae-hyun looked from face to face to face, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it. Every single one of them looked like him. "Abena," he said, when she appeared behind them, her expression unreadable. "Abena, what is this?" "You already know," she said quietly. "Are they yours?" "Yes." His voice cracked. "Who is their father?" Abena looked him directly in the eyes for the first time in 8 years. "You know exactly who their father is." Silence swallowed the room. Somewhere behind them, a waiter dropped a tray, and nobody so much as flinched. If your chest is tight right now, good. That's exactly where this story needs you, because what the test reveals next changes everything. Drop a comment telling us if you saw this coming. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and let's keep going. Tae-hyun demanded a DNA test before he even finished processing the sentence. "Please," he said. "I need to know. Not for the company. For me." Abena refused at first, reminding him coldly that 8 years ago, he had trusted a piece of paper over her own word without a second thought. "Why should I hand you proof now?" she said. "When you never once asked for mine then?" "Because I'm asking now," he said. "Because I should have asked then, and I didn't, and I have carried that mistake every single day since." Eventually, for the sake of her son's futures, she agreed. The results came back within a week. Tae-hyun sat alone in his office, the paper trembling in his hands, confirming what his own eyes had already told him at the dessert table. He was the biological father of all 4 boys. He thought about everything he had missed, their births, their first steps, every birthday candle blown out without him in the room, every fever, every scraped knee, every school play he would never get footage of no matter how much money he had. 8 years gone, not because fate had stolen them from him, but because he had signed the papers himself. He confronted his mother that same night. The DNA results slapped down on her dining table hard enough to rattle the porcelain. "Explain this," he said, his voice shaking with a fury she had never once heard from him. "I don't know what you're referring to," Hae-suk said, not even glancing down at the papers. "Don't," Tae-hyun said. "Dr. Kwon already told me everything. The real results, the falsified report, all of it." "Dr. Kwon," Hae-suk said, recovering her composure with unsettling speed, "has always exaggerated when his research funding is threatened. I would verify anything that man says twice." "I did verify it," Tae-hyun said. "I have the original file, and the courier log with your assistant's signature on the day Abena's letter arrived at this house. The letter you told me never existed." For the first time in his life, Tae-hyun watched his mother run out of words. Hae-suk's composure cracked for the first time in his memory. "I was protecting this family." "You destroyed this family," Tae-hyun said. "You manipulated a doctor. You forged a diagnosis. You intercepted a letter that told me I was about to be a father, and you let me believe my wife had abandoned me. Do you understand what you took from me? 8 years, mother. I will never get them back." "Everything I did," Hae-suk said, her voice rising, tears finally breaking through, "was to secure our bloodline. I did it for you." "My bloodline," Tae-hyun said, "was already secured the moment Abena got pregnant. You just made sure I'd never know it. You didn't protect this family. You nearly erased 4 children from it." He found the original, unaltered medical report buried in Dr. Kwon's old files, obtained after a very uncomfortable conversation the doctor clearly should have had years earlier. "I should have refused her," Dr. Kwon admitted, unable to meet Tae-hyun's eyes. "I'm sorry. I let money silence what I knew was wrong." The proof was undeniable. Abena had never been infertile. There had never been a single medical reason for the divorce his mother orchestrated. His second wedding was scheduled for the following weekend. 2 days before the ceremony, Tae-hyun sat Soo-jin down and told her everything, sparing no detail that made him look worse. Soo-jin listened in silence, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "For sons," she repeated softly when he finished. "For 8 years. I'm sorry," he said. "You deserved to marry someone who wasn't carrying this." "I always knew," she said quietly, "that I wasn't really the reason you agreed to this wedding. I think some part of me hoped it would become real anyway." She stood, smoothing her dress, composed even now. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to them." He canceled the wedding that same day, absorbing the scandal it caused without flinching. But he did not immediately run to Abena's door with flowers and declarations, because some part of him finally understood that discovering his children did not entitle him to reclaim the woman he had let go. Instead, he asked her permission simply to meet his sons, on whatever terms she set. Abena laid out firm boundaries. No public displays for the cameras. No expensive gifts used to buy affection. No promises he wasn't certain he could keep. "If you disappoint them," she warned, "you disappoint them once, not twice. I won't watch you break their hearts the way you broke mine." Tae-hyun accepted every condition without argument. He started small. He showed up to school events and sat quietly in the back rows, clapping loudest for boys who didn't yet know to look for him. He learned that Kwame loved dinosaurs and could name every species with startling precision. He learned Kojo was terrified of thunderstorms and needed the hallway light left on. He helped Kweku with math homework 3 evenings a week, badly at first, fumbling through fractions until the boys started correcting him and laughing about it. Kofi taught him how to properly greet his grandmother in Chui, doubling over every time Tae-hyun butchered the tones. Months passed before real trust began to form. There were setbacks. A missed weekend for an emergency board meeting that made Kojo refuse to speak to him for a week. A birthday gift Abena firmly rejected as too much, too soon. "You can't buy back 8 years with a watch," she told him flatly, sliding the wrapped box back across the table. "I wasn't trying to," Tae-hyun said. "I just didn't know what else to give him." "Give him Saturdays," Abena said. "Give him your actual attention. That's the only currency that matters to a child." He listened. The following Saturday, he showed up with no gift at all, just a soccer ball and 2 free hours, and it turned out to be the best afternoon any of them could remember. Tae-hyun absorbed every correction without complaint after that, because he had promised himself he would not repeat the mistake of choosing convenience over presence. Then one evening, while Tae-hyun was tying Kweku's shoelace before soccer practice, the boy said it without thinking. "Thanks, Dad." Tae-hyun froze, his throat tightening so fast he had to turn his face away, blinking hard against the sudden burn behind his eyes. Abena watched from the doorway and said nothing, though something in her own expression softened, just slightly, for the first time in 8 years. One evening, after dropping the boys home, Tae-hyun finally found the courage to ask the question that had haunted him for months. "Can you ever forgive me?" Abena considered him for a long moment. "I already have," she said. He looked up, startled. "Then, but forgiveness," she continued gently, "doesn't mean I have to become the woman who waited 8 years for you to choose her. I built a company from nothing. I raised 4 sons without you. I learned how to live a full life without your name attached to mine. Forgiving you set me free, Tae-hyun. It doesn't obligate me to hand that freedom back." "I understand," Tae-hyun said quietly, and for the first time he truly did. Months later, Tae-hyun sat among the other parents at his son's school performance, clapping as all 4 boys took their bow on stage. Across the auditorium, Abena caught his eye and offered a small, genuine smile. No dramatic reunion. No stolen kiss under stage lights. Just 2 people who had survived something painful enough to nearly destroy them, choosing peace over pretending the past hadn't happened. After the show, the boys ran straight for him, and Tae-hyun knelt down and pulled all 4 into his arms at once. Laughing through tears he no longer tried to hide. Watching from across the room, Abena finally saw the father her sons had always deserved, arriving 8 years late, but finally, unmistakably there. Later that night, packing up his desk, Tae-hyun opened a drawer he rarely touched and found the small gold ring he had never been able to throw away. He didn't lock it back inside this time. He set it on the shelf where he'd see it every morning. Not as a hope of reconciliation, but as a reminder of exactly what trust costs when you let it go too easily. He never made that mistake with his sons again. Sometimes love survives betrayal, but not always in the shape we once imagined it would take. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't rebuild the past. It simply gives two people the courage to build something better out of whatever remains. If you were Abena, would you forgive Tae-hyun and give their marriage another chance? Or would you choose peace and move forward alone? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't scroll away just yet. Hit subscribe to Story Nest Tales, drop a like, and stay close for the next one. You won't want to miss it.